Despite the efforts of Texas Senator Ted Cruz to derail the vote, the U.S. Senate approved a continuing resolution to fund the U.S. government after removing language that would strip money from the Affordable Care Act. While much of the discussion has centered around the funding for the Affordable Care Act, many Republicans, like Oklahoma U.S. Senator Tom Coburn, felt the rhetoric was distracting from the real issue, funding the federal government. Senator Coburn, you have long opposed the Affordable Care Act, but you are against shutting down the government in order to defund it. How is that approach a flawed strategy?
Well, first of all, shutting down the government doesn't defund it. 85% of it will continue. Number two is if you want to totally defund the Affordable Care Act, you have to have 67 votes in the Senate to do that, because the president's going to veto any bill that does it. So creating the expectation you can do something when we don't have the votes to do it, what it does is it undermines further the confidence of people in the Congress. You know, if you tell people who are significantly opposed to the Affordable Care Act that you can eliminate it, they're going to believe you because they want to. And then when you don't accomplish that, which is impossible to accomplish with the votes that we have, what you've done is give them great disappointment and create consternation when you shouldn't have. Through raising this issue, more people are aware of the fallacies and the problems with the Affordable Care Act. But the big problem is we're bankrupt as a nation, and it's taken our eye off of actually continuing to trim the size and inefficiency and ineffectiveness of government programs.
Why hasn't there been more discussion of the national debt and the effects of the Budget Control Act rather than Obamacare at this point?
Because this has been ginned up by a large number of outside groups to both raise money for the groups and raise identity of those people proposing this.
Is Senator Ted Cruz's faux filibuster part of that?
Sure. I mean, he will readily admit this can't happen. So I think it has more to do with presidential politics than the reality of the problems with the Affordable Care Act. And unfortunately, it's taken our eye off the ball of what the real problems are, is we have to reform entitlements, we have to continue to cut discretionary spending, and we have to downsize the federal government to get it within a range that we can afford it.
The House bill would keep the government operating until December 15th. We understand that Leader Reid is going to propose another version of that bill that will strip out the Obamacare defunding language, but will only keep the government going until November 15th. Do you think that will get passed?
Yeah, they have the votes to pass it. We don't have the votes to stop it. The other thing it does is it spends $20 billion more over that period of time than what we should be spending on what we promised the American people we would spend under the Budget Control Act. So, that's all maneuvering. First of all, continuing resolutions are terrible for the government. They actually make us spend more money by spitting and starting and stopping things. The second is we've abdicated our responsibility to pass appropriation bills. Harry Reid hadn't put one appropriation bill on the floor. So he's refused to do what Congress is mandated by law to do. And then what you do is you take government employees and you don't allow them, by continuing resolutions, you don't address the things you need to address in the budgets every year. So you lock them into doing things and you make them less efficient for things that they have the knowledge, expertise, and wisdom and judgment to do better. So it's a terrible way to run the government.
Non-essential federal operations will halt October 1st, and now we understand that the government is going to default on its loans as of October 17th if the debt ceiling is not raised.
Well,
do you think that will actually happen?
That's just not true. First of all, Jack Lew is not being honest with the American people. The revenues coming to the federal government right now from American taxpayers cover 88% of all obligations that we have in our annual budgets. So the priority would be, would we actually default? Would we not pay our interest or pay off bonds? No, we would pay them off. That's a scare tactic used. The fact is the vast majority of Americans, I think the poll this morning was 62%. The polling number that I've seen has been 68%. People think we ought to cut spending rather than continue to borrow more money. And so that's a scare tactic. Matter of fact, Moody's has said the reason they downgraded us last time wasn't the fight over the debt limit. It was the fight over the fact that we haven't addressed long-standing recognized entitlement programs. So, that's the politics at play.
With an October 1 deadline, however, looming, how do you think this is likely to play out?
It's going to get worked out because there's nothing positive for anybody about shutting down the government.